What was your "I can't believe that worked" moment? In high school I became overly frustrated with my increasingly struggling PS2. It wouldn't read the disc sometimes and it was only getting worse. Threw it down the stairs. It worked perfectly for a few years after that. I still think that should not have worked. I have a friend who opened up his Xbox 360 to see if he could fix its red ring of death. He cut himself on some sheet metal from the chassis and bled all over the motherboard. He gave up, put the Xbox back together, and lo and behold, the thing booted up perfectly. I was running very late to school one morning and pulled into the parking lot where I saw a classmate who was in the same boat. On our way to class, we were discussing what sort of excuse we could make to not get a demerit. We discussed that, to be fair, there was some police activity out on the main road to school. I don't know who joked and said we should tell her that there was a naked man running across the road, but I foolishly thought it was one of those stories so audacious that there was no choice but to believe it if told correctly and with conviction. I burst into the classroom out of breath and went into this long winding story about a naked man running up, down, and across the road and how police were trying to catch him and held up traffic. I was somewhat of a mischievous youth, so my teacher was unconvinced until my classmate, on cue, walked in and said very calmly, "Did you guys see that naked guy on the street?" I think it's the first time I saw that teacher laugh. Whether she believed us or just the gall of it all, she told us to take a seat. No demerits. Having two people who don't usually hang out together, I assume you didn't really know this guy, agree on the story makes it more believable. When I was a kid, my sister sat in front of me. I held my hamster in front of her toe and said bite for fun. Well, he did it and it was the first time ever he bit one of us. There was some blood and we were stunned. I misread a job interview in 1990 asking for a particular set of technical programming skills. During the initial phone interview I realized my mistake. As I had nothing to lose, I continued extolling my experience with this project to the point where I went too far and said I had used it before it was released. After a quick I was on the test program when challenged. They arranged for a face-to-face technical interview 2 weeks later. Completely clueless about this project, I had an idea to phone the head office in the US and asked to be put through to shipping. Once I was transferred to a shipping guy, I essentially came clean and asked if there was any way I could buy the manuals. He said they only shipped to authorized customers, but he liked my attitude to had me a full set air freighted to the UK. By the time the manuals arrived, I had 5 days until the interview. I spent around 20 hours a day memorizing everything I could. I got through to interview, got the job, and a few weeks later arrived on a customer site as an expert consultant without ever actually seeing the product in real life. I stayed with the company 10 years, got a nice sum from a buyout, and eventually was the most senior consultant in the country. I actually wrote part of the code and manual for V2 of the product. Don't go by the karma. This is top notch. Back in high school I used to skip assembly with some friends, or just by myself. A few of us did, and the teachers started sending out prefects to basically hunt down students. A couple of them found me without me noticing, and started to escort me to the principal's office. As we're walking, assembly is let out and a flood of students head towards us. I'd been playing a lot of Assassin's Creed at time, and decided I'd give the blend thing a shot, mostly as a joke. As a group walks past us, I turn, bow my head and walk with them. Totally worked. I even glanced back and saw the prefects looking around confusedly like a couple NPCs. Obviously by my describing my appearance, the teachers caught me anyway, but it was great. Should tomahawk them, then they can't go to the teachers. I once had a math test in high school that I knew I was totally going to flub. I was normally a really good student and did well at math, but today wasn't my day. The test questions were all on one sheet and we were instructed to use blank pages to write our answers. I sat during the whole test just doodling on the blank pages. At the end, I put my name on the question sheet and folded over the corner as if there were other sheets with it, and put it on the pile and walked out. At the next class the teacher pulled me aside and profusely apologized because though she lost my answers, she said she'd just leave it out of my overall class score for the semester. I couldn't believe that worked. When my nephew was young, like one, he was eating and my sister told me to give him a spoon. I tossed him a plastic spoon. It landed correctly in his hand and he used it to eat like it had been there the whole time. Didn't even slow down. I looked at my dad and said, "Tell me you saw that." I went to a private college prep high school for the first 3 years. I don't really recall why I looked into this, but I found out that if all my credits transferred to public school, I'd technically only need 2 more classes to be eligible to graduate. Checked into it further and found out that you can't really just go to 2 classes and leave, unless of course you enroll in the work exit program. Got myself a part-time job and transferred schools. My senior year was 1 semester long, went to school for 2 hours a day, and worked until my friends got out of class. It was incredible. I still can't believe it all worked out. The moment was an audition for a tenor to get into our music conservatory degree program, for which I was his accompanist. The young man arrived for the audition nervous because he hadn't slept well because of being nervous, and his singing voice sounded a bit husky and deeper from lack of sleep. When the university staff arrived to hear the audition, I decided to transpose his audition pieces a bit lower to make them more comfortable and to showcase his voice to advantage, rather than having him strain for the high notes. It was daring, because the scores were difficult and not easy to transpose into lower keys. Still, for his sake, I did it without a work spoken and it worked. No one listening realized the pieces were being sung in transposed keys and he got it. The mind of an accompanist baffles me to this day. A solo musician, TPT, no matter their skill, will never have the sheer experience in situations like this to do what you did. Good on you. Not my story, but one that would never have clicked with me. I guess common sense on safety goes out the window in war-torn areas. Story from Click and Clack on NPR. This woman calls in from a cold northern climate to say her car would not start one morning because the battery was dead, but she didn't have jumper cables. Her neighbor, a recent immigrant from war-torn Bosnia who spoke no English, came out to help. They could not communicate other than with hand signals, so she was really unsure about what he was going to do. He had her lift the hood and sit behind the wheel to start the car. Then he went to his car and removed his battery, turned it upside down and put it terminal to terminal with her battery, while holding it, and had her start her car. It worked, and he gave her a big smile and thumbs up, and he acted like it was no big deal. Her question was that safe? If the battery would have been of the older type, refillable, then yes, very dangerous. Odds are that it was a modern battery, non-spillable, so no chance of leaking. Of course, with this setup many things can go wrong, but for battery acid safety, it was okay. Was trying to get into a developer bootcamp I was woefully underqualified for. Memorized as much of a 100 top programming interview questions list as I could and said my way through the interview. Managed to learn enough on the fly to not look like a complete dumbass, and here I am almost 3 years later, making way more than I should at a job I had no idea how to do when I started. Thankfully I'm a solid developer now, but holy crap, if I never did that, I'd be stuck in tech support forever. So you faked it till you made it. Well done, you. Back in school I was in English class and my friend knew I had not done my homework, which was to write a short story. Knowing this, when the teacher asked for people to read out their story, my friend instantly shouted out that he had read my story and it was really good. In my friend's amazement, I then proceed to stare at my book while making up a full short story. Teacher never noticed. When I was 18 and visiting my 19-year-old girlfriend, who was home for the weekend from college, her father came home unexpectedly. We were not wearing clothes. My first thought was to hide under the bed, but I thought better of it and jumped in the closet. She tossed my clothes in after me and threw on a bathrobe. I was in that closet for hours while she chatted with her father, made some sandwiches, handed one to me in the closet, and washed clothes. While she was getting her clothes out of the dryer, her father came into her room as I watched from the half-inch opening. It was a sliding door. I guess he was making sure she had packed everything for her return trip to college, because while he was in there, he looked under the bed. I was trying to use Jedi mind powers to make myself invisible in case he opened the closet door, but he didn't. Before they left, she packed a backpack for me since I had no car and would be hoofing it to the nearest mall to call a friend on a payphone to pick me up. This was in the 80s. They took off, and about 15 minutes after they left, I did too. Seriously can't believe I didn't get busted. After a long night I realized I had spent drank my last £20 and so couldn't afford the train fare home. Decided to try the ATM anyway. Put in my PIN and tried to withdraw cash. ATM threw an error code then gave me £20. That money never showed up on my account ledger, so free gift from a broken ATM. Sent a Facebook message to a girl I'd kinda disappeared on several years ago. I had just gotten my first teaching job at the time and was so stressed out that I just never got back to her after our first date. Figured I owed her an apology and so I reached out. Now it's been 2.5 years of us together and it's the most successful and healthy relationship I've ever been in. She a waiter. I was 19 and all my friends were older or had fake IDs. Got turned away at the bar by the bouncer. I had never been there before. I went around back, walked through the kitchen through an open back door, past several workers, walked into a hallway where the bathrooms were. There was another bouncer there. I acted drunk and confused, said, "Where'd you say the bathroom is again?" He shrugged, pointed to the men's room. Spent the rest of the night drinking with my friends. Honestly, if you were in the kitchen where I worked so long as you looked like you were leaving, I wouldn't question it too much. I don't get paid enough for that. Friends TV, old tube style, suddenly went green while we were watching sitcoms. As a jest I told him I know how to fix it, walked over and banged it on both sides with my fists. I was only joking, but it actually did fix it. From then on, it became our little joke party trick when other people were over and the TV would go green. I grabbed a chunk of roast beef and chewed it a little bit, then tried to swallow. It was too big to swallow. It got stuck in my throat and now I'm choking. Should I mention I was home alone? 'Cause I was home alone. Frick. After a moment of realizing I was going to die, I just shoved my hand in my mouth, put my fingers down my throat and grabbed a roast beef chunk and pulled it out. After I calmed down a bit, realizing you're about to die tends to make the adrenaline pump, I said, "I can't believe that worked." Literally, those were the first words I said out loud. To this day, I still can't believe that worked. I was eating Skittles a few months back. I live on my own, and started choking on one after laughing at something. I grabbed a wine bottle from next to my bed, don't judge, and rammed the base up under my ribs. Skittle came flying out. When I was a 14-year-old and a pretty douchey person, I found out one of my friends was going door to door selling chocolates to raise money for her netball team. I convinced her to double the prices on the chocolates and we went door knocking and actually sold them all. We gave her netball team the amount of money we were supposed to make and pocketed the rest with a nice $120 profit. To be fair though, I knew a lot of people who my parents bought and sold weed to from, so I made sure we went to their houses. There was something so pure about the joy they had for us bringing chocolate to their doors. It's called a hustle. Sweetheart, you done hustled real good. When I was a teenager I had a friend over from school watching a movie on my mom's VCR. Back in the mid-90s, it stopped working so we pulled it apart to see if we could find something wrong. He saw two pulleys beside each other and thought it looked like one of them should be pulling the other, so we took a rubber band and put it on. That fixed it, and that VCR still works today. Randomly asking a friend if he had a metal detector when we lost car keys in 12 inches of snow. He did have a metal detector and we found the keys. His whole life he had been waiting for that one moment. I swam when I was in high school, and when I was in the locker room getting ready for practice, my friend told me he couldn't remember his locker combo. It was one of those dial master locks that has 3 numbers from 039. I told him move over. I got this and randomly spun it to 3 numbers and pulled down. I got it in the first try. If the lock is badly made it's more likely to land on the correct combination because there is more resistance there. Sometimes there is a tolerance on the locks of ±2. I took a deck of no cards, picked a random card from the middle of the deck, showed my friend a yellow 3. It was a yellow 3. That is the most exciting thing that ever happened in my life. A friend burned me on the face with a cig while talking to a girl. I said to her that it hurts and it could stop hurting if she kissed it. Made her laugh and made out the whole night. A while ago at work, there was a cow that appeared to have something stuck in her throat. Me being me, I said frick it, nose clamped and opened her mouth with my left hand, and shoved my right hand down her throat. Turns out she had a piece of wrap from last night's hay bale stuck just past her teeth. You forgot to mention that you work in an office. Was on duty in my ambulance and the battery decided to die. The back has a separate battery to power the equipment. We had jumper cables, so I had the bright idea to jump start the truck using its second battery. It actually works. I couldn't believe it. EMT here was really hoping for a jump start via defib story, but what you said is fine. In middle school I was bullied a lot and would come home with black eyes and bloody noses. One day I had enough, so I simply walked up to my bully and punched him in face as hard as I could, and he dropped instantly. Everyone was just looking at me and was like, holy crap, that just worked. I was short and chubby. This huge 6'1" morbidly obese dude walked up and knees me in the back of the thigh, almost taking me down. I turn around, reach as high as I can, and punched him in the face. Dude broke down crying. Then he tried the same crap the next week and the exact same thing happened. SMH. I was at the cafeteria at college with a buddy. He was having a bad weekend for whatever reason. I saw this attractive girl across the room and asked him what he thought. He was like, yeah, cute. So I made up my mind I'd go over, hit on her out of freaking nowhere, and presumably he could have a laugh at my inevitable rejection. I was half drunk, reeked like cigarettes, and wearing sweatpants. It was a slam dunk of rejection. I told him I was gonna go say hi and he shook his head in disbelief, as this is way out of character for me. I am shy and awkward for the most part, and no, not attractive. Oh yeah, me and said girl have a house and a baby now. It wasn't even supposed to work. Whoa, she totally pranked you. Back in the day we would hop a fence to go night swimming in a closed community pool. It was always a quick 15-minute swim, then we'd get out. One time someone yelled police and we all got out and ran. While running I almost tripped over a string someone put in his yard to keep off his new grass. False alarm. So we went back to the pool and started swimming again. 5 minutes later I see flashlights all around the perimeter of the pool. It's like they called in the entire police force to get us. We all split and ran. Unfortunately one cop sided me and gave chase. He was on me like the Wile E. Coyote on the Roadrunner for a few blocks. Remembering that low-lying string, I ran back to that house, and just as he was reaching out to grab me I jumped the string. He trips on it and falls hard onto the driveway. I couldn't believe that worked. Good thing too. You'd have been in a lot more trouble for resisting arrest than just trespassing. Years ago, my friends and I were drinking in a park at night on a really cold night because drinking age is 21 and we're all around 19 or 20 at the time. Out of nowhere a cop car appears and slowly drives up to us. Cop 1, what are you guys doing standing out here in the middle of the night? Friend, waves hand like a Jedi. It's okay officer, we're just drinking. Cop 1, oh, okay, proceeds to drive off. Cop 2 to Cop 1, WTF are you doing? Cop 1, crap. Cop car stops couple of 100 feet away and reverses back to us. Red-faced embarrass Cop 1, just dump your beers and get out of here. TLDR, we didn't get in trouble because a friend somehow pulled a Jedi mind trick on a cop, but it didn't work on his partner. We aren't the teens you're looking for. This is terrible and no one should ever do it, but when I was in high school I took 3 English classes my senior year. I had fallen behind on a paper for one class, so I didn't turn it in on the day it was due. I just wrote it the following week, but didn't turn it in. A couple of weeks later the teacher passed back all the graded papers. Obviously, he didn't give anything to me, so I went up to him after class and calmly said, "Hey mister, you didn't pass back my paper." He responded, "I didn't? Well, let me check my gradebook and see that I put it in." He then proceeded to apologize about how he must have lost my paper. I said, "No worries, I have it saved to my computer if you want me to print it out again for you really quick." I ended up getting an A on that paper. I feel so guilty, and yet slightly proud that I got away that, but more guilty for the academic dishonesty. I got caught smoking pot by a cop, so I gave him a semi-true suicidal depression story and how it was either weed or suicide, and he told me, "Well mister, we have 2 options. Option 1 is me arresting you for possession of marijuana and option 2 is you stomp that weed out right here in front of me. I have never stomped on something so hard in my life. As a black male in a country town in Texas, it's easily the luckiest moment of my life. That really is incredible. Everyone deserves a break and this was a good one. Props to the Leo for being a decent human. Hope life is better for you now, man. My college roommate, who hated me, had these really ugly string lights that she refused to turn off at night. I kept bringing up how I couldn't sleep because of the excess light, but she never acknowledged my feelings. After about a month of this I got sick of being reasonable with her, so I decided to take matters into my own hands. You could plug stuff into the other end of the lights, mainly another string of lights, but the plug could not accept anything grounded or polarized. So, I took my coffee maker, bent the grounding pin, and plugged it into the lights. Sure enough, when I hit brew, the lights were toast. When my roommate discovered that the lights didn't work, she assumed that it was because they were cheap and I slept like a baby for the rest of the term. Not my story, but I'm sure the guy who did it must have felt that way. Let's call him Gavin. So Gavin was notorious for getting into events for free. In the cafeteria, he would rarely pay because he'd just sneak through with his friends. At concerts, same thing. He was known for this kind of crap. One time there was gonna be a school trip to Mexico. We're from Portugal. It was quite expensive to say the least. So Gavin arrived in Mexico 3 days before the rest of the class, with a ticket with a discount. He still paid a bit because of the extra stay, but hey, at least he enjoyed 3 whole days in Mexico before his class even got there. When they did, he just joined them and carried on. Here's the awesome part. When it was time to come back to Portugal, he didn't have a ticket like the rest of the class, and besides, it was still too expensive. So, he bought a ticket to the US, which was much cheaper. Now you might be thinking, why would he do that? Well, Gavin had a brilliant plan. He didn't actually have the proper documentation to get into the United States. So when he got to the US, he just got deported back to Portugal. I can't believe that worked. Disclaimer. Didn't happen to me personally, but I read a story about this one. Somebody went into a store to buy 2 lottery tickets. The obvious strategy in this case is to play different numbers on each ticket, so you can double your minuscule chances of winning. This guy played the same numbers on both tickets. Turned out he chose the winning numbers, and he also owned 2 of the 3 winning tickets for that drawing. He ended up winning 2/3 of the jackpot, instead of just half. When I was in the army we had a guy who had somehow gotten military free fall school in his re-enlistment contract. That's a school that is typically earmarked for special forces units. Sometimes other units including mine would send people, but it was pretty rare to get a slot. I was in a specialized unit that made it a little easier, but it was still incredibly difficult. Anyway, so our first sergeant is looking at this guy saying there's no way they're going to actually send you and tells him to go see the sergeant major about it. Meanwhile I had to go report to the sergeant major for sergeant major duty. Bull's duty, where they grab random lower enlisted guys from different companies to do yard work and wax the floors and crap. My buddy and I, we were both E3s. Walk over to the sergeant major and overhear him talking to the free fall school guy saying it's pointless sending you, I'll get back to you, and he walks out. My buddy and I walk in and I say we're here about military free fall school, and he goes, how the frick did you 2 privates get that school? And I said we just finished sniper school a month ago. Maybe that's why, and he goes makes sense, and took down our information. The next day my first sergeant called us all into the office and says I don't really know what the frick you did, but you all leave for school next week. That's how I got to attend a kicker school with a bunch of special forces guys who taught me all sorts of bad habits. Dang, that's badass. I was addicted to nafazoline for nasal congestion. If you keep using that for several days, your nose becomes chronically stuffy and you will never get rid of it. I started mixing the nafazoline with common isotopic saline solution, progressively decreasing the proportion of the medicine. At some point I was talking almost 100% saline solution when I decided to try to stop taking it altogether, and my nose was fine. I got rid of the addiction all by myself. You can also just stop spraying one nostril and breath through the other. When the first nostril is clear, you stop spraying the second. If If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.